Hello and welcome to another patch 269/season 21 build guide for the Crusader class, featuring this time what I call the Sultan's shotgun build for speed G-Rift farming. So to preface, I want to first start off by saying that if your goal in Diablo 3 is centered around Paragon, so you want to farm it as quickly and efficiently as possible, this build guide probably isn't going to do it for you. But if you're like me and you just love the shotgun build in general, and you want every opportunity to play them, including in G-Rift farming, then I hope this build guide will be of some import to you. So before I even get into the build, I wanted to show off my transmog here. I think it's fitting of the theme, and it looks kind of like it's Sultan, in my opinion. So, you know, there's a little Sultan's pet. Little vanity there. Sorry, guys. And as a disclaimer, before I even get into the build, I want to state that I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with the Aegis of Valor set and shotgun builds in general. Also, I'm going to cover the standard setup that I use before going over other variations. Alright, so starting with the gear, you'll want, of course, 5 pieces of the Aegis of Valor set, 2 pieces of the Captain Crimson set, and the Endless Walk set, the amulet and the ring. Moving on from the sets, you'll want the Bracer of Fury, the Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac for high uptime on your cooldown reduction skills, the Shield of Fury, and the Sultan of the Blinding Sand. So this is the item that makes this build work. It is very important that you equip this, so you can't cube it because there is no legendary power. So you can't cheat, right, by, let's say, equipping the Fate of the Fell and trying to cube the Sultan, because it's not going to work, unfortunately. So until Blizzard does something, until Blizzard adds a legendary power, you're going to have to equip this. So if you're like most people out there and you've been throwing these away, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to hold off on using this build. But if you've been saving these, you've been wise, you know, you've been theory crafting, and you finally have the opportunity to use it, right? Because not many builds use the Sultan of the Blinding Sand. Okay, and so what makes this item so awesome is that if you look at the secondary affix at the bottom, it gives you up to 40% chance to blind on hit. And so the implication is if you're running shield glare, right, and like in a lot of shotgun builds, you don't actually need it. So since this is a speed G-Rift farming build, you can kind of get away with this, right? You don't want to blind enemies indiscriminately when you're pushing. But for speed G-Rifts, this is going to help you clear the G-Rift much quicker. And so you get a free skill basically, and it's up quite a bit. And so very important to this build, right? It's central to this build. Okay, so moving on from the equipped gear, for the weapon slot in the cube, you're going to want the Fate of the Fell, of course. And for the jewelry slot, you'll want the Royal Ring of Royal Grandeur. And so, you know, you guys are already familiar with those. For the armor slot, you have options here. Really depends on how optimized your build is, what you're planning to do, and what you prioritize, right? And so I have the Aquila Cuirass. So this is going to give me quite a bit of DR, and it's based on my wrath pool here. And usually this is quite full, so I don't have to worry about this dropping off too much. But if you don't really need it, you can also opt for the Leoric's Crown. This will give you more cooldown reduction, which equates to more damage via the Captain's set. And it will lower your cooldowns, right? Also, you won't need to cast Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac as much. So, you know, there are quite a few benefits to using the Leoric's Crown. Also, if you like the Nemesis bracers, right, you can actually equip the Nems instead of the Bracer of Fury, because you may not, like a lot of a lot of players out there, you may not have a good set of bracers, right? And so if you really like Nemesis bracers and you have a good pair, well, you may want to consider equipping them. All right, I already covered that. Stone gauntlets. Since we have uh, basically perma AC, this is going to be really nice, especially if you're squishy or if you're playing hardcore, right? So, you know, if you're you kind of started the season late and you don't have much strength or DR, you know, this is going to be quite handy. Illusory boots. If you find yourself fighting, like, let's say the Waller Affix elites quite a bit, and you just get fed up with them, right? You just keep getting walled in. Well, the illusory boots might just do it for you. You know, something to consider. And honorable mention is also Pride's Fall. So most people are not going to even need this, but if, you know, let's say you don't have much resource cost reduction, and for some reason your wrath pool depletes quite often, this may be of some use to you, especially if you're using it in conjunction with the Flavor of Time. So this will be up quite a bit if you get the shield pylon, right? So that's 2 minutes or 120 seconds of this legendary power, which is pretty nice. And so for the armor cube slot, it's really up to you, but I like to run the Aquila Cuirass. I just find that it's consistently good. All right, so with the basic gear out of the way, let's go over some of the ideal affixes. So for the helmet slot, it's standard fare. You guys already know how to gear for that. For shoulders, at minimum, people usually run cooldown reduction and Heaven's Fury damage, but I like to have some resource cost reduction, and you don't really need to get rid of strength. Strength is pretty useful for speed farming, right? So I have another pair here. So I would suggest experimenting and see what you prefer. For the gloves, just have double crit cooldown reduction, and then the last affix is of course up to you. Again, I'm going for resource cost reduction. So you can go for strength or attack speed if you want. And for the chest, ideally you'll want to, again, like other shotgun builds, you'll want to prioritize defense, right? Of course, it's not necessary, but there's a use for this, especially with the other setup that I'm going to show you in a bit. Belt, pants, and boots, standard fare. You guys already know how to gear for that. So one thing to mention is that this build is pretty tanky inherently, and so you don't need to have all the damage reduction in the world, but you'll want to have enough, right? And so for the Bracer Fury, just focus on the legendary power. Try to get around 400%. The Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac, you already know how to gear for. Same with the Endless Walk set. Well, so one thing I want to mention is that on the Compass Pros, you may want to run attack speed. So the Sultan of the Blinding Sand is a sword class item, two-handed sword. So it does attack fairly fast, but you may want to run some attack speed. Just make sure you have some cooldown reduction as well. Shield of Fury, just go for damage and cooldown reduction. And for the Sultan, you'll want at least cooldown reduction, of course, and attack speed if you can get it. Unfortunately, mine rolled area damage, so you know that's not bad, but the attack speed would have been ideal for my purposes. Okay, for legendary gems, the basic setup doesn't really vary from other shotgun builds too much. So Esoteric, Bane of the Trapped, and Gogok of Swiftness. I'll talk about other possible gem combinations later. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers it for the gear. Skills. For skills, of course, you want Fist of the Heavens. The Aegis of Valor set requires this for the 2-piece and 4-piece bonuses. So Fist of the Heavens Fissure. For Heaven's Fury, you'll want the Fires of Heaven rune. Looks like that. So this is going to be your main damage dealer. You want the Laws of Valor, Unstoppable Force. This will boost your RCR, which will allow you to keep up your Wrath pool while you're spamming your attacks. And additionally, you get some damage reduction via the Captain set. So right now, I currently have 37.07% RCR from gear and Paragon. And so if I pop Laws of Valor and Unstoppable Force, it will boost me up to 68.54%. And that means that's the amount of DR I get. So it's very, very nice. So this will allow me to use other skills besides Iron Skin. Iron Skin is optional. So I use Iron Skin Flash for additional toughness if I really need it. But you can use, you know, something like Provoke, give you some Wrath Regen, or Condemn, Vacuum to pull in enemies. And so that way you can kill them faster, right? Let's see. You can also get Falling Sword for more movement speed. Or mobility, rather. So it's really up to you what you want to use. Just kind of, you know, do some testing. See where you need to improve and go from there. Alright, so again, this is completely optional. If you're playing hardcore, I would slot this in though. Iron Skin Flash. Akarat's Champion Prophet. This is mandatory in many builds Crusaders use, and there is no exception here. Steed Charge Endurance. This is mandatory for speeds. It gives you quite a bit of mobility, and so you'll be using this skill quite a bit. Okay, so as for the passives, Heavenly Strength is mandatory. Long Arm of the Law. I would say this is mandatory. Holy Cause and Finery. These are really nice to have. If you're playing hardcore, you'll want to sacrifice one of these passives for Indestructible. One other alternative is if you're playing hardcore, you can also use the Hellfire Amulet. You know. Okay, so moving on from the skills is Paragon. Paragon is very easy. So the offensive, defensive, and utility tabs just max out. For the core tab, starting with the bottom, Max Wrath, you may want some. If you find yourself Wrath starved, it might be wise to put some points there, but I usually run without. Movement speed, you guys already know how to allocate points for that. Vitality, you want to have enough to survive, and it's going to be relevant depending on the build that the setup that you're using. So I'll get into that later, but I like to have at least 700,000. For strength, just pour the rest in. Pretty simple stuff. So that was Paragon. The follower, you'll want a follower. One of the benefits of running the follower is the S of Johann. So this is going to act like your condemned vacuum, right? So your follower is going to suck in elites or enemies, and so when they're all grouped together, you want to focus on those packs, right, for easy progression. The Oculus Ring, this is a huge boost to your damage. And of course, if you're using Unity, you'll want to have a follower. The rest of the gear isn't really important, just make sure your follower can't die. And also, you don't even have to use the Templar, you can use the Enchantress even. Skills, as for skills, it doesn't really matter. Again, except maybe Inspire. This will help with your Wrath regen. Pretty useful. Okay, so as I mentioned, I just went over the standard setup. Let's take a look at some of the different variations in gearing. So this was the standard setup that I just showed you. Focus on the endless walk set. So these variations are going to depend on your jewelry mostly. Alright, so this is another standard setup. Instead of using the endless walk set, you're going to use the flavor of time. So I have a rare ring here. This means that you can slot in whatever you want for one of the rings. And so some of these rings that I recommend is the new SOJ. So this will allow you to use gear that doesn't have holy damage on them, right? Pretty useful. I usually run the older SOJ because it's rolled primal. You can also slot in Unity, for added toughness. Gives you also a nice damage boost to elites. Convention of Elements, of course, for burst damage. And for some reason, if you like to run two-man, you can slot in the Oculus Ring if your partner doesn't have it. Benefits the whole party, right? So for potion, it's really up to you. Not that important for speed farming. I like to run armor. You may want to run the Kool-Aid potion if you find yourself getting walled in. So for the other standard setup, the skills are the same. So moving on from the standard setups, we have the glass setup. So you are running the Flavor of Time and the Squirt's Necklace. So in order to do that, you'll have to wear Rorg, unfortunately. Rorg is, I don't know, it's not that good, but you're kind of forced to use it, right? Because you can't wear two amulets. But anyways, the thing about running the Squirt's Necklace is that it's going to be an incredibly squishy build, and so you'll want, in order to attain this this legendary power for any significant period of time, you'll have to give up one of your legendary gems, and I recommend when you're optimized enough and you have enough Paragon so that you don't need Esoteric, I suggest swapping Esoteric for the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. And so this will help you maintain the Squirt's Necklace legendary power. Okay. And also, when you get the shield pylon, this will kick in for 2 minutes. So, not bad. I wouldn't recommend this spec if you're running hardcore, but if you're able to run this, it may improve your times. So something to consider. So again, if you don't need Esoteric, there are other legendary gems that you can use. I already talked about the Gizzard. It will give you a shield, right? You can just run a little bit more damage with the Bane of the Powerful. Or you can get more attack speed with Pain Enhancer. So I recommend sticking with Esoteric because without it, you're going to be quite squishy, right? So especially if you're playing hardcore. So, you're going to need a lot of Paragon and pretty decent gear. So I would just stick with everything but this glassy setup for the time being, at least. Alright, so that's it for the variations in setup. For the playstyle, once you enter a rift, of course, you want to get your 2-piece and 4-piece bonus up. Okay. But as for how the build plays differently from, let's say, like the Blessed Ground build, you'll want to, when you're engaging a mob that you want to kill, right? You want to have AC up, right? And you want to attack with your Heaven's Fury a few times, and then intermittently hit with Fist of the Heavens. So you want to do a set of Heaven's Fury, and then Fist of the Heavens. So it kind of depends on how many Heaven's Fury attacks you want to do. It depends on your attack speed. So you may want to do like 5 and then switch over to 1 of the Fist of the Heavens. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Fist of the Heavens. So something like that. It's gonna depend on attack speed. And of course, you want to have trigger your legendary power on the Zodiac ring. So when you're not killing things, you want to just spam Fist of the Heavens on enemies, right? And so one thing about pylons, the only pylon that I would be hesitant about getting is speed, as it leads to CC immunity. So because the Sultan of the Blinding Sand is going to blind enemies quite frequently, having speed is going to almost instantly CC immune the enemy. So you're not going to get the legendary effect from the Bracer of Fury when that happens. And so it's something to consider. And you know, if you want to get off the rift, a certain floor, you know, definitely get speed. But if you don't need speed, don't get it. However, there is a benefit to getting speed, and that means you're attacking a lot quicker. So, you know, it might be a trade-off you're willing to, you know, tolerate. And as for RGs, unlike, let's say, the Blessed Ground build, you don't really need to worry about RGs except for your Wrath Pool depleting. But they typically die quickly, and so you don't really have to worry about that too much. Okay. So I think that's about it for the playstyle. I mean, those are some important points. I guess the video that I'm about to show you will kind of explain things. And so let me load that up for you. So it's I'm at 3200 plus Paragon, G-Rift 110. And you know, during the season, you're probably not going to get up to 3200, but you know, so just lower the G-Rift tier depending on how fast you can clear it, right? So if you're taking like 7 to 8 minutes to do a G-Rift, that's not really a speed G-Rift, right? So you want to be able to clear it within 4 to 6 minutes. That's what I recommend. So about 5 minutes on average, right? Alright, so let me load up that video for you. Alright, so this is on non-seasons. My seasonal character is not quite up to spec for this. Alright, so enter a ref to get your 2-piece and 4-piece stacks up. Of course, I don't follow my own directions, right? I just go for it. Kind of dangerous. So this is a good floor, typically, but you'll notice that the mob density isn't that good. Also, if you're fighting a shielded enemy, you may want to skip them. It'll take quite a bit of time to kill. Juggernaut is another type of elite that you may want to skip, along with blue packs that like to run away. So like the bees. So yeah, just make sure you're killing mobs if they're large enough. They're a good source of progression. Make sure you're standing on the Oculus Ring circle. Alright, so mob density here is not too bad now. But I don't see any pylons. So I didn't do enough exploring, but that's okay. You don't want to backtrack too much when you're speed G-Rift running those. So since I'm fighting elites, I want to stand still in conjunction with the Endless Walk set for maximizing damage. Okay, so this is a pretty good floor. You'll want to spend quite a bit of time here. Usually mob density is good. There's a lot of spots for pylons to spawn, like up here. So I didn't really need shield, but you know, why not? As you see, my Wrath Pool doesn't really deplete all that much. So I'm keeping up my Aquila Kuros buff quite a bit. Yeah, see the icon here. It goes down every so often. So the elites that you want to fight for this build are yellows, right? So yellows you can target, and they're the only ones you really need to target for progression, right? Even if they're Juggernaut. If you can kill them efficiently, I would recommend doing so. And so if you're sticking next to elites fairly close, you're getting all three beams to hit, so just stay close. There's that Waller I was talking about. So luckily this floor has a lot of elites. The mob density is not that good. So what I should have done was just stayed around and finish off that mob, but oh well. There's enough here. Alright, so just stand still and wail away. Alright, so that leaves 10 minutes and 26 seconds. So that is about 4.5 minutes for this run, which is pretty good. It was not the most ideal rift, but you know, like I said earlier, expect to run around 5 minutes. The range, of course, is 4 to 6. Alright, yeah, 4.5 minutes. Okay, so that is pretty much the build guide. I hope it was of some use to somebody out there. I hope that also people give this build a shot. It's pretty fun. It's different, right? It's a weird, weird playstyle, or not playstyle, but it's people don't normally spec for this, right? No one uses the Sultan of the Blinding Sand. So yeah, any oddball builds out there, I like to try out. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to leave them below, and I will see you guys out there. Thank you for watching.